So there was some critical thinking piece that not all virtual assistants have kind of that capability or that process of thinking.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was me learning and level setting expectations and what I truly needed out of a VA.
Yeah.
And what they were capable, and then matching those two was really important piece of that.
When looking for VA, something important to talk about is their internet capabilities, their computer speed, things like that. So whenever we're hiring a VA, that's one of the first things that we test is how fast is your internet and how fast is your computer. Because you can't be hiring a VA that has super slow internet and it's taking them 10 times as long to do a task as what it should. And
that's a good start.
That's the script.
Congratulations.
That's the script,
Yeah,
bud.
you did good.
Yeah.
I'm Adam, by the way.
Adam.
Rare.
Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
I'll be your host for today. We have
Sucks.
a special guest named Mark Molly.
That's me.
We got a helicopter coming over above us here, so we are good. It is
Nice,
a beautiful,
bud.
beautiful
Yeah.
day.
We're back.
Yeah. On last episode, we had talked about you bringing a joke to the table today.
I don't think we did. That wasn't our podcast. Was that a different podcast you're on?
No, it was our podcast.
You're
Yeah.
trying to tee me up for you to say a joke.
Oh. Did you have too many drinks today?
I'm not asking you to say a joke either,
Oh.
so sorry, buddy.
Well, here we are again, just sort of awkwardly waiting to get the episode started. And,
Yeah. What are we even going to talk about today?
that you should have better jokes. I think that's something that we should really talk about and consider. And our public really wants to hear it out of you,
A
you know?
joke?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want to offend anyone, so I just rather
Knock, knock.
not say any jokes.
Knock.
No knock jokes, but I know where those go.
Yeah, okay.
Today, we're going to talk about VAs. Where to find VAs, what roles they play in a company, what VAs we have, just VAs in general, which VA stands for virtual assistant, or remote workers, whatever you want to call them, but they're a big part of our business and have been for a long time, and we tend to get quite a few questions around them, so figured we'd chat a little bit about our VAs.
Both of us have had good and absolutely miserable experiences.
Yeah.
Going out and hiring somebody virtually. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, things to work through on the front end that we'd like to kind of provide some insight, some guidance. Things that have worked for us, things that have not, that really have been in a lot of ways trial by fire. That again, when they work, it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's great.
huge help.
Just really a great asset to the team that you can get at a low cost hourly rate. But when it doesn't, then you're just investing all your time and energy toward training somebody, and it just ends up sinking you in a different direction that you don't really want to be headed down.
Yeah.
And it ends up feeling like a waste of time, waste of money.
Yeah.
And so getting it right from the start, as with any employee that you hire, right? Like if anybody's out there that's hired employees, it's so tough. You go through all the interview process. Ideally, you have the opportunity to meet some of them. That's not the case with virtual assistants for the most part.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, it's always a risk as you're hiring people, but you want to kind of work through that front end process that will kind of walk you through of some of the things that have worked for us, some of the different processes, way to find VAs, how to question and vet them, things like that to be able to kind of get rolling with them.
Yeah. And we'll chat a little bit about how to, what I would say, mitigate, not mitigate risk, but when you say you're pouring a lot of time and effort into these guys and then for it not to work out, feels like it's been a big waste. Well, there's different ways we've come up with to where that entire process can still be beneficial. Even though that VA doesn't work out, there's still certain things that we put in place to where if it doesn't work out, we've kind of built out a certain process to where now we can go out and find somebody else, plug them in, and all the time and effort that we put in. Yeah, part of that was wasted because that team member's not there no more, but at the same time, there's still some nuggets of gold that we can take out of it and apply it to the next person that comes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And just also getting to a point of, is this going to work or not quicker?
Yeah.
So there's been, I had an experience where I had a VA for 3 months, for instance, and it was sort of just nails against the chalkboard to a certain degree. Maybe not quite that bad, but I kept going with her and trying to train her and get her up to speed and get her into what I needed her to be. And I could have done some different steps up front to accelerate the fact that I recognized it just wasn't the right fit between her and I. And that process could have been more like a month or less to recognize, hey, this isn't right. I need to kind of cut my losses and move on. And for her as well, right? Like, hey, this just really isn't meshing well. So I'll call it failing early or failing quickly, but really just alignment early on is really important.
Absolutely. So it kind of leads into the first question. That first VA that you had, where'd you find that VA?
I found her through a sourcing company. That company was supposed to go through kind of the interview process with me so that all the questions I'm asking, I found the company, told them what I'm looking for, said these are the requirements, essentially this is what I would have them doing day to day, kind of set that. So that groundwork is important, no matter whether you're finding a company to go find a resource or just directly hiring someone off like Upwork or something like that. But understanding truly what you need and what they will do on a daily basis is an important first step so you know what you're looking for. But I went out and found a company that helped to find, recruit, and manage virtual assistants. And the overall process seemed great, seemed straightforward. I loved the idea that there was a manager of the VA as well as interacting with me. So that manager was supposed to track her time. They use, I forget what that software is that they use.
Not Teamwork, Remote. Yeah, I forget what it is too. It'll pop in my head.
Anyway, there's a software that a lot of the virtual assistant companies utilize that kind of tracks somebody's desktop, how often they're actually working on the task, or if they're distracted in different areas. So all of that sounded great to me. Okay, I'm not day-to-day managing this individual, at least to the things of, hey, did this person show up? How long were they working on my project? Which is some of those early on concerns when you don't have trust yet for the individual.
Yeah.
And maybe for any individual, as you hire in any sort of workforce, there's sort of that buildup of relationship, buildup of trust. And so anyway, that all sounded great to me. I went through the interview process. It was relatively quick. We maybe talked once or twice, communicated back and forth about what the expectations were. I said, okay, let's do this. This sounds great. As we started getting into it, it just had challenges from the get-go around accountability and what was being done in execution.
Yeah.
So I was training her, but things weren't picking up as quickly. And then also, I had this concern about her showing up and being there for, I think I was hiring her for 20 hours a week, so like 4 hours a day, which is a lot of time. When you think about 4 hour chunk on a daily basis, there's a lot that you can and should be able to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I had a challenge just kind of getting to a point of productivity with her of what I needed. And part of that was my recognition that a lot of my tasks were not so show up, cookie cutter, do the same thing day in, day out, which in the VA world, there's a lot that fall under that category.
Yeah.
They can follow requests really well. They'll show up, they'll do the same job once trained really well consistently. But what I was requesting at that time, at least, was more of, hey, I have this challenge, like, please go help me solve it. But I didn't give them every single piece of the puzzle to get to the solution. To me, if I was providing all of those, I might as well just go do it at that point.
You already did it.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there was some critical thinking piece that I learned that not all virtual assistants have kind of that capability or that process of thinking.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was me learning level setting expectations and what I truly needed out of a VA
Yeah.
and what they were capable, and then matching those two was really important piece of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that process, like I was saying before, I had her on for 3 months. Bit of a painful situation. The manager that was supposed to be managing her just didn't really manage her very well. Just
Not at
sort
all.
of.
Not at
Yeah,
all. Let's
yeah,
be
that's a good.
honest.
Yeah, I was talking to you a lot about this
Yeah.
during it. Like, hey, is
Yeah.
this normal for VAs? You're laughing at me. Like, no, this is not. So I was having challenges with accountability, which is it's a tough one for me to overcome when you're worried if somebody's actually showing up to work or not.
Yeah.
That's like baseline. Hey, I'm paying you to be here.
Yeah.
I need some productivity, right?
Yeah.
So that was tough. And then just being able to grab hold and run with certain projects was just not getting done. And I was too loose on not just kind of cutting it off early or being a little bit more, I don't know, assertive might be the right word, but just in the fact of just level setting expectations and saying, this is what I need. And if we're not meeting those goals, then it's just not right. We got to part ways. And again, nothing against you as a person, but it's just, in the end, I need what I need, and it's not getting done, right? So those were some of my big pieces of it. I still like the idea of having like a manager manage those individuals in the same time zone, tracking, things like that.
Yeah.
But haven't necessarily found yet actually a company that that does that effectively. Now it's more VAs that we have kind of on our own.
Yeah.
So maybe you speak to your experience. Maybe one, how many virtual assistants you personally have?
Yeah.
What some of those roles are today for you and your business and what they fill.
Yeah. So VA's been a big part of my business for the last probably 10 years at least. 10, I don't want to say 15. Let's say 10 to 12 years, doesn't matter. But back then, there was only a handful of companies, to my knowledge, that really, in the real estate space, I should say, that really trained VAs for real estate, whether that was transaction coordinating, doing sales, whatever it was. But similar to the company that you went through, they would find the VAs, train them up, and then once they're ready to go, then they would hand them off to you and they'd become a part of your team. So back then you were limited on the companies that you could choose from. And back then they actually did a great job of managing that, helping manage that VA, continuous training with them, always wanting feedback from you, the employer, on how the VA is doing. And then they would take that feedback and adjust accordingly, to where now it's such a big business. There's so many companies out there, and there's some money to be made, where a lot of these companies just, all they care about is recruiting VAs, finding a VA, finding a client for that VA, and that's it. They'll put on a spiel about all this support like you were supposed to get, all this managing, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these companies just don't do it. So there's a lot of shit companies out there anymore, really. So my first 2 VAs happen to still be with me now, came from that company. And then after that grew the team. Right now we have about 6 VAs. One's part-time, so I say about. It's 5 full-time, 1 part-time. All the other additional VAs came from referrals from my original VAs and word of mouth. So it's such a big business anymore, virtual assistants, that in other countries there's forums on Facebook and LinkedIn and other places where they go to post resumes on what they can do. And when looking for VA, something important to talk about is their internet capabilities, their computer speed, things like that. So whenever we're hiring a VA, that's one of the first things that we test is how fast is your internet and how fast is your computer. Because you can't be hiring a VA that has super slow internet and it's taking them 10 times as long to do a task as what it should. And unfortunately, I've been a part of that, where one of my VAs right now, I hired her mom on, and her mom was with me for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And like any member of your team, the longer they're with you, the more they grow kind of like family. Even though you don't see them, you're still interacting with them during the week. So it was to the point to where I can't remember her internet speeds, but it was something where you get the VAs up and running and they start to do a really good job. Then you kind of become hands off. You let them do their thing. Once in a while you start to check in. And so I started to check in on some tasks and it's like, how come this took 5 hours to do this? This is like a 45-minute task. And she's like, oh, my internet's slow. And I was like, okay. And then started to adjust kind of what I was giving her. But it came to the point, it's like, you're my other VA's mom. Like, I love you guys to death. I've had you on probably a couple years too long, but just didn't want to let her go. But it came to the point where her internet was so bad that couldn't sustain having her on any longer. And I should have done it, like I said, a long time ago, but finally said, hey, this is not working out. So those little requirements, some stuff you really don't think about, but those things are really important to make sure that they are efficient when you're giving them tasks to do. So now it's, like I said, the team is built out mainly from referrals from other VAs, and we have one guy now that on the team, when we're looking to add new members, we kind of specifically go through him because he's got a big network of other remote workers that he can help tap into to find and to get plugged into us, which has been a big help.
The team members today then are kind of front-end lead generation, like the role themselves. Front-end lead generation, property management.
Yeah, so we have a couple cold callers, lead generators that will do cold calling, texting, things like that. We have a marketing manager that handles pulling data for our team, which can take a while. When you're on a dialer, you have full-time sales guys, and you're calling through people, you're texting people, you're doing a bunch of outbound lead gen. You need a lot of data, and that's something that, to me, took a little while to figure out because that was on my plate for a while, was collecting all the data. Then I started to realize, I was like, this is taking way too much of my time. So now the VA specifically she'll get notified when we're coming close to finishing a list, and then that will initiate a task for her to go out and pull more data for us. She helps keep the CRM clean. She'll input certain pieces of info on properties that we're going after into the CRM for us. She'll help out with email campaigns if we're emailing real estate agents, things like that. So she helps out with quite a bit. And then, like you said, a property manager. So we have mainly one VA. There's another VA that will help out periodically in property management, but mainly one that handles all of our management, which is a pretty incredible considering the amount of properties that we have under management. But being able to take advantage of some technologies and systems and processes, this one VA can handle all of the property management for us, which has been a huge help.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Yeah, you're right. Usually there's teams and
a
whole company that basically would have to go out and manually do a lot of these processes, these steps. And having just one VA, low cost, low overhead.
Yeah.
Okay. So everything from kind of front end lead generation, cold calling, top of funnel, I'll call it, within a sales mindset approach terminology, all the way down to properties already acquired. There's now property management. So kind of through that whole funnel piece.
Yeah, and then one last one we have too is a developer that helps out on the back end of things with our CRM to help build that out.
Oh, okay.
Some of the stuff in the property management, some of the processes and stuff we have on the technology piece of it, she'll help build out the code and all that to put the pieces together to have the different systems talk to each other. So she's been on board now for the last probably 2 or 3 years, and that's been a huge help too.
So for the people listening then, hey, that sounds great. I'd love to have a VA. Where would you recommend them to kind of get started? Because also from us, I mean, we have people, we've worked with VAs in Philippines, in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, South America, different parts of South America.
Yeah.
So kind of a mixed bag, actually. And historically, I would say Philippines had a lot of maybe more. It was more popular, a lot of the companies were started sourcing out of the Philippines. The cost of labor was
I
cheaper,
think, yeah, the low cost was what really drove that market for sure.
and then English tended to be decent.
Yeah.
Some better than others, and if they're on a like a cold calling role, you really want to find somebody that's low accent sort of thing if they're picking up and
Yeah.
just straight up cold outreach.
Yeah.
But outside of that, so where would somebody get started with going out and finding a VA?
I would say really specifically what role you want them to do. Obviously, we're talking about real estate, so just Googling like real estate VA companies, you'll pull up ones that we've kind of chatted about a little bit that will help manage that VA, but those guys can really be a good starting point to get into the VA world per se. For you to try to go out and find one direct through, there's a lot of different little techniques about like going to the Philippines Craigslist and seeing a bunch of contacts on there and recruiting people from there. There's recruiters within these countries that you can get connected to, and these recruiters, all they do is recruit VAs to bring you for you to vet and you to take through the process. But these companies that are out there can be a really big help. If you've never had a VA before, it's a good safe start to get into. They can be a little bit more pricey, which is something that I was going to touch base on. What's price of VAs is that a lot of people, at least in my head, tend to think of virtual assistants, if they don't understand them, they're $2 an hour employees, $3 an hour, which back in the day when I first got my VAs, yeah, that was definitely the case. But as this has become a bigger and bigger business, to get quality VAs, the price has definitely increased 3 or 4 times what it was 6-7 years ago even. So you kind of pay for what you get. Sometimes you can really luck out and get let's say a $2 an hour VA, $3 an hour VA, which even that's getting harder and harder to find.
Sure.
But again, you pay for what you get. So realistically, for a starting point for a VA, it's roughly, let's say, $5, $6, $7 an hour, up to, we have VAs that we pay north of probably $15 an hour when you consider in some of the bonuses and things like that. Which kind of segues into their overall compensation is, for these guys, it can be a career. They're making, even though they're only making $4 or $5, $6 an hour, whatever that number is, in their country, that can be a really decent living. So for us, what has enticed our VAs to stay is paying them similar to what you would pay a really good employee here in the States in regards to additional benefits. So we pay health benefits, we give unlimited time off, we give performance bonuses, things like that. So when these guys come on board, it's one of those things to where you can get somebody long term for $5, $6, $7 an hour, as long as you're treating them as like an actual employee and you're paying for health insurances and some of the other benefits that they would get if they're working in another industry within their country. So that's been big for us for retention of VAs.
Going back to that question was like, how would somebody get started? And then how do you find the right fit? It ends up being kind of, Google search is going to be very helpful for you. That type of company that has VAs there that have trained the individuals as well. A lot of the real estate VAs have been trained on real estate, understand terminology. They understand, if it's for cold calling, for instance, they've walked through scripts and been trained on it. You're going to train them on your own processes and what works, and you're going to help listen into calls if you're doing it right from a real estate perspective. You're going to listen in and help provide guidance along the way. However, that extra piece of training means something that you don't have to do on your end, or at least it's farther along when you have that VA ready to kind of rock. And so your comment about you pay for what you get is very relevant, right? So if you got to value your own time and say, what's the amount of time that it would take for me to train somebody, and then also manage the individual. So if you do it right, and if there is somebody there that's trained them and is helping to manage them, it's really a great resource for you. But make sure you interview several companies or get referrals or something like that of a company that will be the right fit for you, because there's nothing more painful along the way of investing, really it's the time and energy up front. It's not as much the dollar amounts, for me at least, that, hey, I picked the wrong person. It's the fact that I just spent all of my time that got sucked into training an individual that was the wrong fit for me and for my company.
Yeah.
So I think kind of that front end piece is really important. Make sure you get it right, and then just test it out and make sure you're ready to make a switch if it's not working.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, man, it's not in your best interest, best use of your time to be training somebody on the very basics of real estate.
Yeah.
What's a house, what's a mortgage, like what's a duplex, things like that. It's not worth your time, but obviously for you to bring on talent, they need that very basic training if they had no real estate experience and how real estate is here in the States versus outside in other countries, since it's vastly different. So yeah, those companies that, like I said, are a great start because they do have that foundation coming in. So when they come in with you, you're mainly training them on your systems and processes and not necessarily very basic stuff that, again, it's not the best use of your time to be doing.
And then training them, I think, is an important piece of actually what I learned from you around utilizing videos.
Yeah.
So maybe talk through that a little bit of how you train your VAs, what that looks like. How do you go from standardization of like a training video, let's say, to be able to utilize across any of your VAs or anybody you onboard?
Yeah. So that was something that took me a while to learn. And like we talked about before, it's some of the things you learn, once you learn, it's like, dude, this is common sense. How come I didn't think about this earlier? But for a long time, just like you, struggled, like bring on a VA, you do all this training, didn't work out, would be super bummed out. And it's like, dude, gotta start this all over again. And then part of the training with the VAs was I was recording videos on screen recording of my computer about, hey, here's how to do this task. I'd send it over to them, and that's how the training went. Well, I never saved all those videos or anything. It was just I would send it over, get them trained on it, move on to the next thing, whatever. And then it's like, dude, I just need to start saving this stuff. So that's why I was saying earlier in the video where to help kind of mitigate time loss if a VA doesn't work out is being able to put these videos in place. So that way you're documenting all your processes and your systems and whatnot, and you're training the VA that way through mainly screen recordings and one-on-one trainings where you're recording the training session with them, and then saving those and categorizing them so they're easy to find. So that way in the future, if that VA doesn't work out, now you can bring somebody on board, and it can even get to the point to where, like we have now, it's like, hey, here's your first 30 days with us. Here's kind of what each day looks like during that first 30 days. And it's so simple to put together because now we have all these videos saved. So this first 30 days of you coming on board, there's definitely going to be interaction between us and the VA and checking in with them every single day, checking with them and chat with them a little bit. But majority of all the training then is just, hey, watch these videos. Obviously, as you grow as a business and your systems change, things like that, those videos can become a little bit outdated. But again, if you keep them nice and organized, it's really easy to go in, find a video, do a quick update to it to keep it relevant. But at the end of the day, majority of the time that video still lays the foundation for 80% of what you're trying to get across. And then the other 20% may be a couple updates to that video that you can just train the VA on directly. So bringing on a VA now, it's a lot easier because the training is already there from videos that have been recorded in the past. So now I'm not spending all my time training, not that I do the training now, but my guys that oversee that, they're not spending all their time repeating themselves over and over and over again when new VAs are coming on. They're letting the VA watch the videos, check in with them. Hey, do you have any questions on this? Okay, no. Now let's implement some of the stuff you learned and then move forward the following days with additional training. So that's been a huge help. And I know that's something that you started to do a little bit with your VA.
It's been awesome. Yeah. I utilize it in most forms of business for me. It just is something that I recognize. I was retraining individuals, and the ability to just take one video, and even if you train somebody,
they find it extremely useful of referencing back to the video because people have a hard time sometimes ingesting all of that information at one time. And especially a new employee that's just sort of a deer in the headlights, looking around saying, oh, I don't even know which way's up. And you're just getting fed that much information. By the time you're ready to go back and reutilize what the first day one was teaching you, it's nice to have something to reference back. So even for them, it's a wonderful asset.
And it's for you too, like something that pops into my head just happened recently was you'll build out certain systems and processes. And for me, I'll dive in that rabbit hole and I'll just go nuts for a week or however long it takes to build out this process that I need to get in place and get off my plate. And some of the stuff, like one recently was one that happens twice a year. This task comes up, it happens twice a year. When this task comes up though, there's a lot to it that needs to be done. So when this task came up, one of the VAs reached out to me saying, hey, I got this task and just want to make sure I do this and not do this. And then for me, I gotta be honest, I didn't remember what the entire process was. So then I can reference that video a bit and say, oh yeah, now I see what you're talking about and give her a little bit of guidance. But after a while, you have so much different stuff set up that you'll forget exactly what that process is. Especially a big thing for me is when it comes to data. Because again, the data, when you're feeding the machine's a beast and it eats tons and tons and tons and tons of data. And when you're going through data, there's a lot of steps to formatting it, filtering it, putting it in certain spots, skip tracing it, the list goes on and on and on. So a lot of that stuff is so technical and whatnot. You would dive into it, and honestly, a month later, you forget every single detail. You know at a high level what needs to be done, but again, a month later, you forget. So when it's a task that happens once a year, twice a year, whatever, having those videos in place not only helps out the VA, but also helps refresh your memory and also helps you realize, hey, do I need to go in and update anything? Has anything changed with this process or for whatnot? So those videos are a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other key takeaway that I've seen from you as well, learned from you really was VAs training other VAs. So like the dialer, for instance, honestly, they use that thing day in, day out. They're more adept at it than you are. And not to say that you didn't help the first one get going, all of that, but to your point just a second ago that you're not in it day in, day out. So you would have to kind of retrain yourself the intricacies of each and individual piece of the dialer, for instance, or you have your VA that's working on this day in, day out, and he trains or she trains that next individual. And one, they're most knowledgeable, but two, it takes it off your plate to go out and train, which is, two huge benefits of that.
Yeah. After a while, once you do your training with the VAs and they're off and running and they're performing, like anybody that you should hire on your team, the people you're hiring should be better than what you are at that given task. So you bring somebody on, like you just said, somebody that's on the dialer, after a while, they're going to know the ins and outs of that dialer way more than you, and you're starting to go to them to ask them specific questions on stuff. So having them as a resource to, like you said, to train is a huge help. So now again, when they come on, they have like a first 30 days that they go through a lot of recorded videos, but then outside of those recordings, a lot of the other training comes from other VAs that are in similar roles that are helping do the training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I would say one thing, just randomly thinking, is since they are remote workers, like the main way we communicate with our VAs is through, we happen to use Skype. We message through Skype, we'll do calls through Skype, things like that. But one thing is to keep them engaged. Them being remote workers and you guys only chatting through Skype or whatever service you're using, it can be really easy to not forget, but not checking in all the time, like not realizing, having the connection that they're actually a human being. Like you don't really ever see them unless you're doing video calls. They're working all the time in the background. But I think staying engaged with what's going on with their personal life, chatting them up with, hey, how was your weekend? Things like that, doing team meetings, doing one-on-one meetings, treating them like their actual employee that happens to be like in your office. Keeping them engaged goes a long ways. I've made that mistake in the past where
I would go through a training with let's say somebody that was on the phones. I'd go through the training with them, and then after they're trained up, I would maybe check in with them like once every couple weeks, because you get busy with doing your own stuff. That's the whole reason you bring a BA on, is to help out.
Sure.
So you get busy with their own stuff, and then after a while, there's no connection. They don't feel connected to a team. It's just the retention rate can definitely go down unless you're staying engaged with them and having it be an enjoyable experience for those guys.
And productivity as well. I had that same mistake as well on virtual assistant, or even kind of a day job career wise that I've had in the past of remote workers, that I didn't stay as connected as I could and should have. For instance, that I recognized later on, it's important to have weekly meetings. Video calls are a great way to, that extra piece to stay connected, that you can actually see people's faces back and forth. I didn't recognize, I think all of us kind of went through a COVID environment as well, that we recognize, oh, this is nice to actually see people and see their faces. There's something differentiating between having just a regular phone call and seeing face to face. But at minimum, having that weekly one-on-ones with your folks, with your VAs, that allow them to just communicate any things that they're having challenges with, any questions. And then again, just kind of have that connection point that allows them to really feel as part of the company, feel as part of the team, feel connected to you, maybe even some loyalty or something along those lines, to be able to make sure they stick around with you. They want to work with you. They're happy working with you. They want on his team, right? And vice versa as well, right? You want to get to know them, and they're helping you out with your business. They're making a huge impact in your business, and you want to be able to show that and emphasize it and take care of them, right? So that's an important piece too. Yeah, staying connected is something overlooked by a lot. It was overlooked by me. Kind of my first VA.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, you're bringing them into majority of time work a set amount of hours, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever that is. But again, just building up the rapport with them and treating them like family, it makes it a lot easier to where you can say, hey, I need your help on the weekend. Can you help out? And they're more apt to stand up and help you out, knowing that it's a great environment to work in. They love the job, and it's not something you're asking all the time, but I think that goes a long ways when you're kind of asking them to do stuff a bit outside of the box, or a bit outside of what their actual role is.
Yeah. Very good point. Very good call.
Cool, man. Anything else?
Awesome, brother. No, I think that's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. You did great.
Okay, see you. Bye.
At that.